Couldn't go past this headline from the only source of news you need, Lad Bible. Who reads Lad Bible? Who has the app? It's got to be a garbo in Britain with a teeny face.
Oh, Bruce Willis is retiring. No more diehards. That's a right bloody shame, that is.
Look at how chat it looks. It looks like if Franklin's bought Mamma Mia today. Anyway, I'll stop paying him out because I'm ripping their headline entirely.
Scott Morrison says...
I know it's Aussie, but come on. It's
Lad Bible, UK's greatest export other than... curries? Oh wait, they come from India. Tea. No wait, that's Chinese, innit? I suppose it is Lad Bible, yeah. Scott Morrison says Aussies wanting rental relief should just buy a house instead.
That's the Prime Minister. If you're having trouble with renting, have you thought about buying a house? You do realise that's why we don't have a house, right, Scott? Who is thinking, hey, you know what I prefer to having a pool I never use and the right tone of ferret? Having a Chinese man dressed in Tarakash announce he's going to rummage through my house and criticise me heavily for having blue tack stains on the wall and possibly kick me out for it. Well, my friends call me an empath, so I really like the feeling of helping others, so I totes them down with half of my paycheck going to paying off someone else's investment. Renting. It's like being a medieval serf on land, but you don't get any of the surplus. Listening to that man's off-the-cuff views on housing, it does make a lot of sense why the Liberals have stuffed up the housing market this much in the last decade, and we're going to get to that, but first, I just want to show you this mansion that went for sale recently because it's amazing. Just humour me on that. Just look at this. I feel like making you feel like shit.
I'm Mitchell Wynne, and on behalf of Harlem Prestige Property, I would like to introduce you to Cove House.
Okay, settle down, Mitchell. You didn't direct the new Batman. You know that a house is going to be fancy when instead of having one of those royalty-free audio tracks, they hire a symphony. Don't worry, I'm getting to a point here. I'm just saying, doesn't this house feel like it's like higher than your level of self-esteem? It's kind of like realising, yeah, I could chat up Eva Longoria at the club. Now, not in Desperate Housewives days, I'm not that good. That's this house. Essentially what I'm saying is, this house is out of your league, but look at how much more out of your league it's gotten in 10 years. It's a great indicator of prices in this country. This house sold originally pretty much on the dot when Tony Abbott took the reins for $4 million. Seems like a steal now, right? Because in just 10 years, it has increased to a value of $14 million. Doesn't that seem like a bit too much of a gouge? $12 million. That seems unfairly unfair. You know where that extra $2 million came in where you thought, okay, you're just bayoneting a corpse at this point? Last year, when prices went up across the country by a quarter in 12 months. That is no accident. Over the last decade, the Liberals have done everything they can to make housing prices skyrocket and your wages to stay stagnant. And mission accomplished, but may I just say, what a f***ed mission. Not just to f*** ya, double team ya. Ugh. Makes sense why Scott Morrison's a Sharkies fan, eh? Previous 10 years, majority held by Labor, Sydney housing prices grew 31%, wages went up 41%. Last 10 years, exclusively held by the Libs, housing prices went up 105% and your wages went up 18%. That is no accident. That is the result of them listening to about 15 policy think tanks that are all owned by developers, which again, 15. I make the point again. Isn't 12 enough? Couldn't be satisfied with a ×3 return on speculative investments, i.e. doing nothing and making ×3 your money. They had to inject another $2 trillion into the housing market in the last year alone. $2 trillion. The housing market is now worth $10 trillion. That is $10 trillion that is doing nothing. It's essentially guarded in a cave by that dragon in The Hobbit. It does nothing if it's in a house. What that money should be going towards is building businesses. It should be in the stock market, being invested in things like EV companies and go low. It's honestly my biggest peeve with the coalition calling themselves the party of strong economic managers, because they move the economy away from being a functioning, contributing economy that actually builds things and just gear it slowly into a bunch of fat, lazy foreign investors that get rich off of doing nothing, and all of the money just gets funneled into that. So essentially you are left with a shell company of a country. But you can go through the exact pinpoints of what the coalition deliberately did to rig the economy towards people that are getting rich off of speculation. Look, this was the first one. Halving the capital gains tax. What happened to housing? Then the next one, yeah, we'll just make the independent reserve bank full of independent Liberal Party hacks, and they cut the interest rate 3 times. No, actually, I've decided that wasn't enough. Let's cut the interest rate 6 times, almost in direct alignment with a global recession. That's a good idea. Oh, what's that? Housing prices just went off the fucking charts. I know what we'll do. We'll compile a Senate report about why housing prices are mysteriously exploding every time we're in government, and what's the conclusion of this government that's completely bought and sold by property developers? I know what we're going to do. We're going to loosen restrictions on property developers even more. That'll solve the problem because it's a supply issue. It's always a supply issue. Every time housing is brought up, the Liberals say it's because there's not enough cardboard box apartments in Sydney. That's the problem. So we need to loosen regulation even further on property developers that build houses that can catch on fire because somebody didn't put their cigarette out in a metal tray. i.e. my office. Whoopsies, left the rissoles on the stove a little too long that day. Think about what the instinct was during COVID. Every other country followed Kevin Rudd's economic model, except the place that birthed Kevin Rudd. We did the exact opposite. Everyone else realized, okay, you're supposed to give the public money during times of recession so you can keep the economy moving. Our government's immediate instinct was, you know who doesn't have enough money? The big 4 banks. They gave them virtually unlimited cheap credit. That got handed out in the form of mortgages. That caused housing prices to explode in a year. That's why you had 25% growth. That means that a bunch of people are getting those mortgages on the idea that interest rates are going to remain low for the rest of their lives. They're not. There's probably going to be an interest rate spike at the end of this year, and then people with these massive mortgages will have to default, i.e. exactly what happened to trigger the global financial crisis. The Liberal Party thought, hey, we missed out on the GFC because of that terrible economic manager Kevin Rudd. Oh well, time to correct the errors of history. I love copying my big brother America. Truly phenomenal to look at how much damage the Liberals have done to the economy over the last 10 years. Not just to the country, to you. $1 trillion of public debt, some of the highest private debt in the world. Where's all that gone? Into you having a place to keep your fucking PlayStation. And now, after that report, Scott Morrison has decided, tilting the rules in favour of property developers even more isn't enough. Let's also allow people to buy houses on a 5% deposit. You know, the people that got a mortgage they can't afford on extremely low interest? Let's tempt them a little bit more. Go boys, jump for it. And if I may finish this on a conspiratorial note, shout out Mr. Morton, my modern history teacher who's probably dead. He was pretty old when I was in year 12. But he slipped this one into the Civil War, which was, he thinks the reason the Liberals are constantly talking about housing affordability and how they're trying to deliberately increase the price of housing, and hey, that just means that you need to get into it as well. Let's just funnel more people into this little bison herd trap. He thinks the reason Liberals do that, and I agree with him now, is because if you're focusing on your mortgage, if you are shit scared that if you aren't able to meet your next payment, you're going to be homeless, what do you think about being obedient? Anyone who even promises the idea like Howard of, I'm going to keep interest rates lower than Paul Keating by 0.25% maybe, even though I have no say over that, that is going to look really appealing. In fact, I know this from people that have been long-time Labor voters. As soon as they bought a house and they got that housing tax scare campaign last election, It was really hard to put a 1 next to the Labor candidate. They can drown out every other problem with the country. Macroeconomic, environmental, your public services going down the toilet. They can focus on this percentile. It might be a little bit higher under the Labor Party, even though it actually has nothing to do with us, but you don't need to know that. And you are so desperate for that little percentile to go down that you're willing to believe it. Anyway, make sure that you like and subscribe. Sign up to our Patreon. Check out friendlyjordies.com. See you next time.
Please share and comment below. Comment.